So I'm Manny, and I chose to do my presentation on play, and specifically how play affects the way children learn, grow, and develop, the effect on cognition and learning as they grow and develop. First, before we can do anything in science, we have to set a definition for the thing we're trying to measure, which sounds pretty easy, difficult to do in practice when it comes to play. A lot of the research has talked about how play is a phenomena in which it's very easy to spot that's play, but sussing out the exact criteria for this is or isn't play is fairly difficult. Most of the articles had varying definitions of play. So what I did was I sort of compiled these general points to give you an idea of what criteria researchers are using. The biggest thing is that play is an activity children do that is intrinsically motivated, is voluntary, and most importantly, it's fun. This is something that all of the researchers seem to agree on, that children would not do this if it was not fun. Broad categories of play, sort of umbrella terms being used in the research to encapsulate all the different kinds. There's free play and guided play. Free play is what most people think about when they imagine a child playing. An excellent example of free play would be if you take a toy and give it to a child with no direction or any sort of, here, do this. They're going to pick it up. They're going to start tinkering with it. They're going to see, does it have moving parts? Does it make noise? Or what happens when you throw it up in the air and drop it? I did that a lot. And this is what Piaget was talking about when he described children as being little scientists. Is they're very curious. They're always trying to discover what things do and how to interact with the world around them. The other key points of free play that are important to know is there's no goal. If you don't take anything else away from this, just know free play does not have a goal. Free play is often spontaneous, and if there is a plan, it's very loose. Let's pretend we're spaceships. Okay, and then they go. There's not really rules or guidelines of how to do it. Now, you have guided play. Guided play is a very structured type of play where an adult is leading the child towards a specific learning goal. So whereas free play did not have a goal, learning play or guided play needs to have a goal. That you're trying to teach them something, and the literature refers to this as scaffolding. They kind of describe it as like bumpers on a bowling alley. Is you're catching them if they stray too far away from the learning goal, but you're not guiding them the whole way down the lane. You're sort of asking thought-provoking questions, things like that. One of the most important things with guided play is the child has to maintain agency or autonomy. Otherwise, you tend to see a drop in the amount of retention and overall participation, because the children they're sort of being told what to do in terms of, instead of being an active explorer, you're supposed to be sort of reactionary in that sense. One of the most basic forms of guided play is Simon Says. Simon Says, touch your nose. If they do that, they win. If I don't say Simon Says and they touch their nose, they lose. The learning goal for Simon Says is pretty clear when you boil it down. It's active listening and being able to follow directions. I put this picture up hopefully to help clarify some of the differences between the types of play. As you can see, free play, this is literally what I did as a kid when I dumped out my whole box of Legos and just started going, building whatever, no particular plan in mind. Pre-assembled play is more like if I were to follow the instruction booklet on a Lego set, or if, say, an adult was to build the Lego set for me and then I play with it. Whereas with guided play, as you can see here, the adult is playing with the child and can turn this sort of simple activity of building with blocks together into a learning activity. thus making it guided play. So for example, depending on how developmentally this child is, you might ask simple questions like, hey, that shape you just picked up, what is that? And they'll say like, oh, it's a square. Or what color is that? Seeing if they remember these basic colors and shapes. Whereas as they get older, you can start asking them, more advanced questions. You can ask them, how many blocks do you think it's going to take to build our roof? Or how many horses do you think can fit in the barn we just built? Giving them an idea of spatial awareness, things like that. Now, there's a number of different benefits to play. Play is very, very good for kids. Free play, the literature talks about how free play is how kids understand who they are, how the world works, and who they're going to be. Anytime you've ever seen a child pretend to be a firefighter and go save someone from a burning building, or you've seen a child taking care of a doll the way they would a young child. Any of these sort of role-fulfilling types of play, they're experimenting with roles that they may one day fulfill. And they typically do this based on experience of what they've seen from adults in their life. So it can be very, very healthy for them to understand and explore who they are and who they want to be, all of this. Free play is also great for managing energy, because anyone who knows anything about kids, they have a lot of energy. They never stop going. And I say this as a kid who was born with ADD. So lots of energy, and free play is great for expending some of that energy down to more manageable levels. This is part of why outdoor play and recess is talked about in a good bit of the literature. One study did it exclusively on outdoor play and recess and found that outdoor play is positively correlated with lower BMI and impulse control, and overall a general positive affiliation with exercise. Kids that were taught to play outside early on tended to enjoy being outdoors and being active. It's one of the reasons why physical education is important. Now, one of the overarching benefits of a guided play is you can have a goal. With free play, your kids are learning a lot, but you have no way of assessing whether what they're learning meets a specific academic criteria or not. And so guided play can be a great way to, like I was saying earlier, set those bumpers and help them learn whatever you're trying to teach them. Not only that, when you do try to teach something to a child via guided play, you tend to see these benefits. You tend to see higher engagement rates. Whatever you teach them, they tend to remember it better. And also, there's fewer distractions while they're learning, especially in a school setting, because they're not disrupting the class because they're bored and flinging a rubber band across the room. They're actively participating, and so of course all these other things make sense. They're paying more attention because they're engaged. This is by no means an extensive list of things that have been studied with guided play, but just to give you an idea, it's been found effective at teaching math, science, boundaries, rules. One researcher was saying that one of the best things a parent can do is not just advocate for guided play in the schools, but do guided play at home. If you're trying to teach them, don't leave the fridge open. Make a game out of it, where they get points if they do it, they get points if they close the fridge, and they lose if they don't. Things like that. And you'll find that it's much more effective at teaching them these rules and boundaries and really anything. So, we've talked about the benefits and all the good things that happen because of play. I wanted to share some of just the interesting little tidbits I found from my research. First of which is pretend play, which much like these fearsome pirates at the bottom of the screen are doing, pretend play is where you're sort of pretending to be something that you're not, and it can take any number of forms. Let's pretend we can fly, let's pretend we're pirates, any number of things. And when kids engage in this type of play, it tends to increase their problem-solving ability and their self-regulation ability, or they were positively correlated. But what was interesting and surprised even the researchers is that the reverse was also true, meaning that those who were high in problem solving and self-regulation were also more likely to engage in pretend play. So they theorized that there may be some sort of beneficial cycle going on where if you encourage your kids to pretend play, they'll be better at these skills, which will encourage them to continue to pretend play, and so on and so forth. So absolutely encourage your kids to pretend play. It's very good for them. The other one was a study that studied passive learning, which is more like a lecture, versus cooperative and competitive guided play. And what they found was that competitive had the highest overall effectiveness and engagement. They theorized that with competitive play, children were learning ineffective problem-solving skills from the other kids who were also trying to solve the problem. Kind of a blind leading the blind situation there. Thought it would be different. Thought it would be the other way around, but hey, that's why we do research, right? Talk about the literature regarding play, you will often see referenced sort of debate that has happened in the past where even though guided play has all these great benefits, some of the skeptics still argue that that's not how the world works. That it would be unrealistic for a high schooler to walk into a high school classroom and expect to play for the majority of the time. The world just doesn't work like that. And so some of the skeptics and critics argue that that's all well and good, guided play, but we need to get our kids used to sitting in a desk, used to raising their hands, teaching them proper classroom etiquette so that they will be prepared for the rest of their education, arguing that even though their initial years in school may be suboptimal, once they get down the basics of school, the rest of their education, they'll be primed and ready to go. Those in favor of guided play are arguing that that's all well and good on that end, but unfortunately the first few years are very crucial developmentally, and the first few grade years are going to set the foundation for the rest of their academic career. So if they don't have their basics down, you're going to see students start falling behind. Unfortunately, there are problems when doing guided play in the school system because guided play does have a few limitations despite all of its benefits. Especially in a classroom setting, teaching anything that has a learning goal in mind where you have to construct an activity around it takes time and planning. Both those things require prep time. And as anyone who's ever worked in the schools will tell you, you don't get a whole lot of prep time. And the prep time you do get can often be interrupted by teachers coming in to talk to you, parents need to talk to you, a child comes in telling you that Susie kicked them in the shin. Any number of things can cut into your precious prep time, making it challenging to set up an activity like that. Many guided play activities also require some kind of supplies, which unfortunately the administration probably isn't paying for. Which means it's coming out of the teacher's pocket, which considering their salaries, that's not really a realistic expectation to have of them. And even if you get past all those, sometimes your classroom size is too restrictive. Running guided play with a group of about 8 to 10 kids is wonderful. Running it with 30 kids might be really challenging, especially if you don't have, teaching assistants or just other adults there to help keep an eye and make sure everyone's participating and not throwing rocks at each other, for example. And even if you could circumvent all of those previous limitations, sometimes the boss tells you no. They say, your idea is great, but this is a strict curriculum. You need to follow the lesson plan we've laid out for you. To wrap everything up, here are the main takeaway points I want you to get from this lecture. First, free play has no goal. It's done for its own sake. Guided play has a learning goal in mind, and an adult has constructed the activity to help kids reach that learning goal. Guided play increases your engagement, your overall learning, attention, and how effectively children remember what it is you're trying to teach them. So it can be very effective. And one of its biggest downsides, it does require setting up a learning goal. It requires planning initially. But Once you do that, it can be adapted to a variety of different learning goals. That's the end of the presentation. The next 2 slides have my references. If you have time, highly recommend look them out. Some of them are some really interesting reads. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and stay safe, and I'll see you in class.